These are some of the peculiar elements or unusual elements that make it quite different from other scriptures you might be familiar with. It is also a very poetic scripture. It has rhyme, it has rhythm, it uses natural imagery, it uses metaphor and simile and alliteration, and all of those things that you learn in English class in 5th grade make something a poem or make something poetic. Right? But Muslims would never refer openly to the Quran or clearly to the Quran as poetry. And this is because in Arabia at that time, poets were an important group of people within the society, you might say, of Arabia. And they were people who would, I guess they were a bit like people who publish newspapers today. They would, compose poems that would be sometimes satirical. They would sometimes be insulting to people. Other times they would be praising certain people and building them up and so on. And so they were sort of like hired figures in that way, susceptible to influence. They would compose poetry for whoever who would pay them or patronize them. And Muhammad is, and sometimes they were thought to be inspired by jinn if their poetry was particularly beautiful. And one of the things that the disbelievers say about Muhammad when he starts reciting the Quran is they say, oh, he's just a poet. He's just a poet. Right? And the Quran says Muhammad is not a poet. Right? He's not a poet. So for this reason, Muslims tend not to speak of the Quran as poetry as such, but we can say de facto all of these elements in the Quranic text would make it poetic as we understand that term in English. And the other thing to be aware of is the way God is referred to in the Quran. He is sometimes referred to in the third person by his names, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and sometimes he's referred to as simply he, right, with that pronoun. But he is also referred to sometimes in the first person, right? Sometimes God is speaking directly in the Quran. We, I. It uses both we, both the royal we, the plural, first person plural, and I. Right? So, and even you, there are places in the Quran that are really sort of like prayers, especially the opening chapter of the Quran, where God is also referred to in the second person. It is from you that we seek help. Right? It is to you that we turn. Right? So God, be aware of that. It can be we, it can be I, it can be he, it can be you, and be referring to God in the context of the Quran. So let's jump into now what the Quran says about God. What I want to do, I don't know if I'll have time to do it all, but what I want to do is introduce you to some of the key themes that you find in the Quranic text itself. And one is the nature of God, right? That's what one of the important themes that the Quran communicates, who God is. We said yesterday the major word, the primary word for God in the Islamic tradition is Allah, and in Arabic is Allah. But the Quran also uses many other names and descriptions for God that come to be understood as names of God. And Muslims have picked out 99. I'm not sure I got all 99 on this handout that I gave to you, but 99 names that are considered official names of God from the Quran. The Quran says that to God belong the most beautiful names. So you should call him by them. And so while Allah is the primary name for God, there are also these other names that Muslims can use to indeed call upon God, right? They can call upon God as El-Qudus, as the holy. They can call upon God as Ar-Rahman, the compassionate. They can call upon God as Al-Halik, right? As the creator, and so on. Right? So this is the list of names. I want you to maybe just take 1 minute, I know you're all speed readers, just 1 minute to kind of look through some of the names and tell me any observations you have about this collection of names that are found in the Quran for God.